You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Icons, where listeners are introduced to incredible people working within the law enforcement community who have made a profound impact in our world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. On this episode of Icons, we're joined by guest host Renee Fornshill, the wife of Kevin Fornshill, who is our featured guest on this episode. Kevin and Renee met when they were both active in the field of law enforcement, but Kevin has since retired. Renee sits down with Kevin in the Precinct 444 podcast studio to discuss where Kevin's career began, the early days of their relationship, the impact of law enforcement on their family, and what he does for law enforcement now that he's retired. As with many of our other Icons episodes, they also talk about the difficulties of working in this profession, as well as the positives of serving the community. Join us for this special episode involving two of our volunteers. And now for Icons, featuring Kevin and Renee Fornshill.
Well, hello.
Hello to you.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your time on the force. This is my husband, Kevin Fornshill.
And you're my wife, Renee.
And you spent 22 years on the force. Did I get that one right?
No.
Dang it.
But that's okay.
That's okay.
24 years.
Okay. I was close.
It was an even number. Yeah. You're okay with that.
With the U.S. Park Police.
Yes.
Started out as a
uniform patrol officer and then was promoted to detective.
Because
I married you.
Thank you. Because of me.
You motivated me. You complete me.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you had actually wanted to get your gold shield, right?
I wanted to get married too, so it worked out pretty well.
But you had wanted to be a detective.
I did.
Before we met.
I enjoyed patrol work for a long time.
Yes.
But with the stability of marriage, it was time to look long term.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And kind of, I guess, starting off like talking about family life, like when we started dating, I want to say that was really a very big concern for me.
That you were dating me?
Well, I mean that you were in harm's way.
Oh.
Like active harm's way in D.C. And I mean, not that any really law enforcement is in none.
Well, if this is complete disclosure, I was worried about you too because you were working in a federal prison.
Yeah.
You were the first female executive staff member to be at Marion, Illinois.
Yeah, at the Supermax. Yeah.
Where things were not safe for you day to day.
Yeah. So actually, when we first met, we were in San Francisco.
That's true.
So we were both kind of off the street or away from danger. But then for just the first year.
Yeah, except for when they broke in my car. All right. But yeah.
But that was kind of like a consideration I had because the idea was that we would be moving back to the district and that you were probably going back into uniform.
That's true.
Yeah. And so that was like a concern.
And rightly so, because you dealt with a lot of correctional officers and that was worrisome to you when I was going back in uniform.
Yeah, exactly right.
I appreciate your concern.
To get into a detective position was part of the consideration of us getting married. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You motivated me to do that.
But also, I think that's an interesting part of our story specifically because you had already had many years on the force.
I think about 10. I think.
Yeah, you'd had like more than 10 years on the force at that point. So you have like a good perspective because you have like a good period of time where you didn't have a family when you were on the force, and then like half of your career you didn't have a family.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Until, again, motivating me, looking long-term, not being a bachelor anymore, who wanted to make as much overtime as possible and arrest everyone for violating the law versus say, you know what, there's soccer practice tonight. I think I'll let you go. So, there's a balance there.
That's an interesting thing to think about. Like before getting married, were you more prone to be like harder and arresting people and not so much, or no?
Well, now you make it sound like I'm violating people's civil rights here.
No, absolutely not. That's not what I mean. No, but I bet that would go into your thinking, maybe. Maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I know. Maybe that's not fair.
No, that was not fair. I think
it's just always
as a single person with no responsibilities, I don't even know if I had a cat or a dog at the time. Was more amenable to making money because I thought money was the most important thing, and you'll put in for the overtime or arrest people and arrange for your court date to be on your day off.
Yeah.
So you can. It sounds horrible, but you can sort of work the system.
Yeah, where it's time on the job. It's like hours on the street when you're not married, when you don't have a family. That you can have just more overtime, time, without a conflict.
I don't want to say to my credit, but a lot of the single guys also would make themselves available for holidays to work for the married personnel. Yeah. Because who's going to entertain me for Thanksgiving? Nobody. Yeah. So I would rather make myself available to work a major holiday so a fellow officer could be at home with his or her family. So we have a lot more latitude when you're single.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us into probably the point in our life when we were separated. Because I bet a lot of law enforcement families go through this.
Do you want to bring that up now that we're separated?
When we were dating and we were in a long-term relationship. I don't mean like that. I mean separated as far as like distance and time.
For the listeners at home,
space.
We weren't going through a crisis. My lovely wife and I were married in November of 97, and she was still assigned to the prison in Illinois, and I was in D.C. It wasn't until December of 98 where we actually were together in the same state.
You're always so good with those dates.
Do you know our date of birth? Do you know our anniversary?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Don't test me.
But
I do think that it does come up where families might have to have a period of time where we're separated because one person's being promoted or moving, and maybe that's something that's very much in like military, but law enforcement as well. I would think.
Well,
there's a time.
You saw it more in the prisons than I did.
Yeah, definitely in the Bureau of Prisons. Yeah. We have families that have to manage that similarly to the military.
Yeah. If they're working on a career, they might be stationed or assigned to two different institutions 1,000 miles apart from each other.
And we were separated for 2 years, a little over 2 years, right?
We were engaged, but
we weren't like married, separated, but we were like physically in a long-term relationship after we had started dating and got engaged. So that entire engagement period was also.
And we made an effort to see each other every other week.
Yeah. And that, I'm sure, was a strain on your work as well, because you go from a lot of time on the street and taking every overtime that you can to then having to flying back and forth.
On the occasion I had to drive in order to pick up your cat and bring your cat back from Illinois.
Okay. That was
a treat.
That was a treat because my cat did not particularly
like me at the time. But we developed an understanding.
So she hissed at him? She hissed at you the whole way.
Yeah,
so
that was pretty bad.
Yeah. What love does.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get married, then we are actually able to station back together in the district.
In April of 1998.
And you have already made your gold shield at that point, right?
I was a low-grade detective. I was a call investigator before I was promoted to detective. So So that lasted about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So we were together. We had different days off, but I was working straight day work.
Yeah. So I have to say that from my perspective, that was a really hard thing to get used to as well. So like when we were first coupling, the idea that you would be in harm's way and kind of just the thought of you being in danger. But then when we were living together and finally married and I was here, that was kind of difficult as well because I had never experienced like shift work where someone was moving their shifts around based on every 3 months. And so there's like something to get used to as far as, because I just had a straight regular 9 to 5. I mean, there are longer days than 9 to 5, but just a straight. day work.
I'd like to think that the only serious conflict we had was, I think I had Fridays and Saturdays off.
Yeah.
And of course you had Sundays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So,
so we only had one day, but that's actually going to be part of our story from here on out now, is that there's only going to be
we'll share it with the rest of the audience. Yeah.
There's only going to be one day. Maybe that is the secret to a long marriage.
So what do you say now that we're together
now we
like
have
every
all
day?
the time. Now we have all the time together.
All the time in the world. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So shortly after I arrive here in the district, we start having children. So that also changes the dynamic as far as covering the kids or having someone at home and taking care of the kids. So at the time, it was not customary for men to have any time off, right? It was only maternity leave. And even at that, it was still just coming into
I think I see where you're going with this. Yes, you became pregnant, which I take some credit for. During the pregnancy, we were faced with the fact that we needed to care for our child.
Right. How we were going to do that.
How we were going to do that.
How are we going to do that?
And to your credit, you shopped around and looked at different I don't want to call them preschools, but I guess daycare.
Yeah, daycare. Yeah, that was the original thought, that we would just, because we both work 6 days a week. Basically, the schedule before Benjamin's arrival was that we just work 6 days a week, almost like 10, maybe even 12 hours a day. We just worked constantly.
Well, to remind the people listening that we only had one day off together. And the fact that we got pregnant. That's a testament to,
but things had to change basically when the children arrived, because that schedule just couldn't continue.
Well, the first hurdle was trying to initiate maternity leave, or family care leave for a expectant father, and during the time of your pregnancy, we found out that a Baltimore police officer put in for it, and he was denied.
Yes, right.
And subsequently, he sued his department and won. So I think that settlement was just weeks or maybe a couple of months after.
But I think it made national news.
It did.
It was big enough that it was like, oh, this Family Leave Act applies to both mothers.
Yeah.
And fathers.
And being essential personnel, that was the notion, wait a minute, can we afford to lose you?
Right.
And I'm sure people in my office say, yeah, we can afford to lose Kevin anytime. He can go. So our young son, Benjamin, was born. You took 6 months off.
Right. That was very typical for the mothers. Like we would have 3 months of leave, and then 3 months that you could take, as like work from home or have a lot more flexibility there. But then I asked the department
for 6 months leave
for 3 months, and somehow it was 6 months because it was like 3 months off.
It was 3 months full-time leave, and then we had enough accumulated that the remaining 3 months was half leave.
Oh, half leave, right? So, but in essence, by the time he arrived in '99. We had a full year that we were in some way either completely home, or I should say one of us was completely home.
Absolutely.
Or working part-time or part-time from home.
They had complete coverage for both our children.
Yeah.
Even to go so far as to you obviously working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I was able to adjust my schedule on occasion. And I think we talked about this in the car ride over here. The hardest was one particular day. I went in at 4 p.m. and got off at 2 a.m. And I was due back at 6 a.m. to work a 6 to 2 shift.
Yeah, those shifts, the shift work and having children and being up all night and coming home.
Yeah.
I do look back on those and just think, how could we make it? But after the first year, we had to really decide how are we going to manage long term as far as our family was concerned. And how did that, after that first year, what did we come to an agreement with?
Well, as I just described to the audience here, we would juggle, since I had some leeway with my hours, either working 8-hour shifts or 4 10-hour shifts. I could adjust my schedule in order to cover the time that you were at work, and we would literally pass each other in the hallway.
Yeah, and that was really that was really tough. And then I went part-time. At that point, after the first year, we just decided we can't pull down 2 full-time jobs.
Another history-making event when you became the first DOJ attorney to work part-time.
Again, I feel like we got a lot of me, but it's not me.
I'm still talking,
it's us.
So it's okay.
Yeah?
It's us. We're
us.
A team.
Exactly right. So what we did was we still did 6 days a week.
Yes.
But you did 4 10s,
right, and
I did 2 10s, and so we worked around those shifts so that there was someone home.
The only day we had off together was Sundays.
And then how did that feel as far as work was concerned? Like, what, you are now a detective, a junior grade detective, obviously when the children were very little. So how did that work as far as your cases or?
I still put my energy into my cases the time I was in the office. The toughest was the call-outs where my name was on the call-out list, so I would have to respond.
Yeah.
Either on a Friday night.
Yeah.
11:59 p.m. on Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday, and then and since I had Sunday off, so that was the toughest because the midnight crew was off at midnight. I'm sorry, the evening crew was off at midnight, and anything after 12:01 we had to respond to.
Right.
So there might be times when you get a phone call. We had just gone to bed at 9 o'clock, and the phone rings at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So you have to respond to a scene.
And I would say, like, for me, you working the 10 hours actually really helped because I was off that day. So whether you were 10, you know, when we were doing 8s and we were trying to be off exactly at the same time so we could pick up the kids or have the kids available, with the schedule that we had, that I was just off. And so when you would go onto a crime scene, you can't just leave when you're, because your day is over.
Much as I'd like to.
You have to stay. Mm-hmm. So, and so whether you were working a 10-hour day, you almost got paid for that extra bit of staying. And then if you had to stay another 14 hours, then I was still able to be available and at home, and there wasn't any like we need to pick up the kids.
Yeah, that was pretty tough. Up until the time I retired, I was still an hourly employee, so any extra hour would be reflected in the paycheck. And the toughest things also, the days you worked, which were Monday and Tuesday. Yeah. If something were to happen over the weekend, then I had court responsibilities on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays in particular, there's many occasion when I'd have to take the children into D.C. court, and I'd stand there for hours while I was papering a case. So
they did.
They knew the ins and outs. My son and daughter would travel with their little backpacks, and they would be in the hallway of the court building.
They did,
sort of entertaining themselves, and there were more days than I care to count about that.
Yeah. But also, I think something good for them. They were exposed to a lot of that. Just up and go and they were in the district a lot. I think that was a really very good thing. They were very comfortable with DC and being in a big city. And even now our daughter works in DC and she's very comfortable.
That's true.
And I think that's a part of her like upbringing and part of your work and part of being in.
I'd like to think it's both of us doing that to make them comfortable with I get city life as it is.
Did you have any friends or colleagues that were hurt on the job?
I had I had a friend who died on the job of a heart attack. Somebody who was I knew professionally and somewhat personally, and others that died that I knew sort of peripherally because I didn't work with them all the time. But any loss at all is it makes you sort of reassess what you're doing and whether you're doing the right thing. This guy, did he know that he was going to have a heart attack when he went out to work that day? So it's I don't know how to respond now.
Well, it kind of brings it into reality, like that you are doing things that, that's, I know that while I was at the USP Marion, we had 2 staff stabbings.
Yeah.
And so when those type of things occur, it's not anymore like theoretical about it. Yeah. It's when you talk about law enforcement, like laying their lives down, it's not only like, you think about that happening, but then people and you see people actually get assaulted. I'm sure you've seen many people because you used to do riots and demonstrations, and many people officers are assaulted during those.
Yeah.
So
if something had ever happened, and I remember doing this multiple occasions with you, is if something had occurred, I would call right away and say, I'm all right.
Yeah.
And then
we had a rule about that. Yeah. Remember when we would talk to each other, especially it would happen on both sides when we were first dating and I was inside. But remember we had a rule that if we called each other, we would say immediately, right away, that I'm okay and I'm all right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it makes it very present to us because when something like that happens, it is part of your love relationship. That's that true. You couldn't maybe come home at the end of the day.
Yeah, which is a tough thing.
Yeah.
We've missed a lot of holidays and birthdays and celebrations together. So it's we do the best we can to try and put the leave in advance or get ready for a family event, but it's unforeseen sometimes.
Yeah, and just definitely making that balance where you have work and free time and personal time. It's just trying to get that balance correct.
I will say that we really did good by our kids, and the fact that we juggled so much because both of us realizing the best people to raise our children were us.
Yeah.
So
we were lucky in that way. We were very lucky to be able to live in the district and not have to have 2 full-time income. And really, when I came down, we had to readjust how we lived because we just had less income coming in, and so making it work, because not everybody can do that. So making it work where we have an income and a half that is able to.
And even the hours that had to be put in for the work. I mean, it's again, unless it was an emergency or something to do with a case, I would do whatever I could to be home on time.
Right.
Even to the just would do that. So.
Yeah. Part of being a detective is you're interviewed by the media. And so remember you would call home and the kids and I would be able to occasionally you would call home. So, you want to share some of how that feels or...
Tell
them a little bit about what that is like. So you're at a crime scene, you're on scene, and then what happens?
Well, if you want to get the information out to the media as quickly as possible, we have a public information officer, a PIO, who would contact the media, and the media would always want to go for the person that knows the most information, and in reality, that's going to be the detective. And a lot of detectives don't like talking to the media.
You were great. You were great.
So there were occasions where I might be looking for somebody, and I would ask for help, and we would walk around an area where an offense occurred, try and give details about the person we're looking for. So that happened on a couple of different occasions, and it became very useful. So that's just how when the media and law enforcement sort of cooperate with each other. So I'm saying a lot.
Did you were told by the information officer that they needed to do an interview, and then
if I have something, if I have a case and I want to get the public's help on it, I contact the PIO and I say, this is the case. Do you think anyone's interested? And it being sort of a media town, the local stations, since they have hours to fill, would always say, okay, we'll meet with whomever. at the location, and we'll do a little stand up. There was one occasion. Oh, this is so embarrassing. There was one occasion when we were. There was a guy who was this horrible sort of vandal that was vandalizing and damaging a lot of government property back in, I'm going to say, the early 2000s. I remember his name to this day, but no reason to disparage him now. So he would walk up and down the Parkway or the National Mall, and he would be painting or drawing swastikas and putting Hitler swastikas and putting Hitler patches and stickers on different government property. So I had dealings with him in the past, and I knew where he lived, which was
like under a bridge, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was like a troll.
Yeah, he was under a bridge.
He was like Billy Goat's Gruff. He lived he lived in the outbound span of the 14th Street Bridge on the Virginia side.
Just permanently? He would just be, or that's where you could find him.
I don't think he's paying rent. So.
But that's where you would find him.
He had a river view, though, which is great. So he actually broke into a service hatch, and I had occasion to go down there while we were investigating the case, and it's huge. It's like the size of a football field. And he had moved all these, he moved his clothing down there, and he moved like a porta potty, and he had a stove, and a really amazing setup. Wow. So we locked him up once, and then he did time, and he got out, and about 2 years later he was doing it again. And just funny things you remember. It was a local Channel 5 station, and the PIA called, and he said, "Hey, it's a slow day. Channel 5's looking for something."
That's not right.
I said, "Well, all right. I mean, I get off at 4:00.
I do remember that one, though. I remember with the kids sitting around and watching you on television for that one.
I said, if they want to meet me, I'm going to go outbound 14th Street Bridge. They can meet me at 4:00 at this location, and I'll show them. I'll have a flyer, and I'll show them where this guy lives." And they said, "Yeah, that'd be great. And I said, "Then I'll go home from there." I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." So outbound span of the 14th Street Bridge, there's a little meeting strip, and I pulled up, and the little news crew showed up, and I gave some background, and I gave them the flyer, and this is the person we're looking for, and this is his suspected activity. And you kind of walk up the bike path, and there's this hatch, which has now been properly secured by welding.
Oh, no.
So, and I'd point, and the news crew's filming, and I go, so this is where he would live. And I said, oh my gosh, it's not secured. So I lift it up, and I put my head down, and I looked at the camera, and I go, oh, dear God in heaven, he's down there.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So they got the arrest on TV.
Oh, gosh, they got the arrest on television.
So I climbed down, and I said, hey, it's me.
Wow.
This
is not your day.
It wasn't my day because I wanted to get home. So
it's not his day either. He was going to prison.
Yeah, and then had to process him, and I wasn't home for about another 5 or 6 hours.
I know. I was going to say that day you definitely weren't home. But I think also the reason why the news station was doing it was because there had been a lot of those kind of hate symbols that were like popping up.
They were very much interested in it.
Yeah, they definitely were. Not just this particular individual, but in general because of crimes that were occurring.
Well, just embarrassing for me to look at the camera and say, "Oh gosh, he's here."
The criminal we're looking for.
I'm sure I used some other expletive, but. And just flashing through my mind, I'm late for dinner. Okay. I think it was like lasagna night.
It's going to be late for dinner. So those were a lot of those calls. It's going to be late.
We had a number of those, didn't we?
We did.
We did. So, that was that's sort of a funny thing, and it talks about family life. So, I'm trying to think what else.
What was kind of the hardest part about the job as it relates to... Well, I guess the job in general, but like as having a family, and what's the hardest part?
I think it's you and I again talked in the car right over here, which we're not going to talk about the specific case, but there was an occasion where I was investigating the death of a 3-year-old in a drowning.
Oh gosh!
And we had a 3-year-old at the time at home. And
it wasn't just the drowning. I mean, there was some allegations.
Yeah, that there
were problems there.
I'm going to yell Penelope here in a second.
Oh, mercy!
We shouldn't.
But it wasn't just that, because there wouldn't be a criminal investigation for just a simple drowning.
There was some issues that came up.
Not
and
simple drowning.
It was it was not a simple death investigation.
Yeah, and it was also difficult because you had children. Our kids were about the same.
Yeah, Benjamin was 3 years old.
Yeah, about the same age.
And you were pregnant with Isabel.
Yeah.
Oh, now I gave away our kids' names.
I know, right? Exactly right.
Uh-oh.
Also, we were working on 9/11. Do you want to talk about that day?
Benjamin and I took you into work. Yeah. It was a Tuesday. That was your normal day. And as our routine would take you in. I think we were a one-car family at the time.
Yeah.
And came home.
Yeah.
Benjamin, we normally would go out for a walk in the park with the dog. For some reason, I don't know what it was, but something had happened where it's the only time in his life he actually sat in front of a TV for hours and hours watching PBS Kids. Because we have two televisions in the house, and he was upstairs watching these cartoons.
Yeah, we did have like a restriction on television, so our children would normally not be allowed to have extensive television. We have television, but I mean extensive television.
It would definitely be
watching, especially not in the middle of the day.
So I don't know what it was. I'd gotten word about it, that something had happened, and then I turned on the local radio station when everything was breaking, and I went downstairs and was watching the live feed. And then that's when the calls came in for me to come to work and me trying to call you.
Yeah.
And it was horrific, absolutely horrific. Not just for what happened that day to this country, but as a father and a husband trying to find his wife when D.C. had shut down the cell service and all the phone lines are jammed, and realizing later from what you told me that they just basically evacuated your building.
Yeah. And
there were just cars just stopped and people like abandoning everything and walking just different locations with not knowing what was going on.
Yeah. And you weren't supposed to be working that day, and I think that also kind of leads towards what the effect is on the downside on law enforcement, because, this kind of reminds me of a time when I first started working at the penitentiary, and when we would have an alarm that would go off and you would run towards the assault that was happening. You have immediately a sense that you are leaving safety and you are running towards danger. Yeah. And in 9/11, it felt like that happened globally for us as a country. We were like leaving safety, and the men and women in law enforcement ran towards danger, because we have retrospect now to be like, oh, we know what happened on 9/11. But when you were being called in and when I was trying to leave, we didn't have any idea what was happening. If we were at war, if there was a country that was attacking us, what danger was there. And obviously the Pentagon was burning when you were being called in.
Well, I look how much news at the time was just wrong. I remember listening to the local news station here and them reporting that car bombs were going off by the State Department. And I called my friend and mentor, a dear man who loves you. Well, he's since passed, Ernie Honigman.
Yeah, your partner.
And he was on duty, and I heard it in his voice and he heard it in my voice. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "He said, get Renee out of the city as soon as possible."
Yeah, right.
And
because
I said, "I can't get in touch with her."
Know.
And I said, "I don't know what to do." He said, "Just get her out." And I said, "Okay." So and then we lost contact because you're forcibly evacuated from your building. There's no cell service. Right. You got on a metro. And the metro took you to the Pentagon, and then you walked.
Right.
Like a march through what you had to get to the airport.
Right. And the incredible part of that day is after the 2.5 hours of walking, 3 hours of walking, just to get out of the district, just to be able to try to find some way back to you. Then as soon as we saw each other, still completely not knowing what was happening, and obviously the trauma of what happened being in the district on 9/11, then you and I just basically have to leave each other again. We have to just come together for just a moment, and then you have to go back into what I basically felt like we had just escaped from. So
got you home. We had Benjamin in the car, got you home, got you settled, and went right into work and was there for maybe 20 hours.
Yeah, and when I was brought to the Pentagon on the subway station, it ended at the Pentagon, and when I came up, there was just walking wounded everywhere. There was helicopters flying deafeningly low so that you basically couldn't speak to one another. And they were triaging people. Basically, as I came up, they were putting people in 3 different categories, but there were critically ill people that were right next to me and right next to the people that we were standing next to try to get out of the district. So it was a absolute reality to me, palpably, about what you were going back into. So it's those moments of like decisions that you have where, I don't know why, it seems to me like as we're talking, I'm trying not to make things too hard, too, deep, but as we're talking about things, like so much of when you first start dating, when you first start conceptualizing law enforcement, it's very hypothetical, but then you have these moments where they become, just blatantly clear.
I will say this: when you and I were dating, and at one point, I'll share this with our audience at home.
I don't know what you're gonna say.
Renee actually was interested in becoming an FBI agent.
Oh, when I first left law school.
Yeah,
when I first left law school.
She actually took the test to become an FBI agent. Now, this is a good story. You want to?
No, I don't. I think this is kind of a bad story. I don't think
it's a funny story.
Okay, well, just up until the point where they tell me that I'm not going to be employed.
So Renee wanted to be a bureau agent. And
wait, let me just back up. I didn't specifically have that. They had recruiters that came to the law school. And so there were many different recruiters that came to the law school. One of them was the bureau. And it wasn't like me singled out. He was recruiting a lot of the law students to apply for the agents.
But you took
the
a test,
agency.
right?
Yeah. So they said there's this simple test. It's basically just to see if you can add.
I think it was
add and subtract.
A triangle, circle, and a block, and you put it into.
Exactly right. No? They're like, listen,
something else.
It's completely simple. He's like, the first one's just a general knowledge test, but then the next one is a psychological test.
Dun, 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 dun.
So he's like, it's these are it should be very simple.
Please tell us more.
Well, anyway, so then I take the general test, and he's like, perfect, fine. He's like, but the second test, they just weed out serial killers. Maybe the FBI doesn't want to hear this, what like a recruiter would say. But anyway, they were like, the psychological test is like, what do you want to do on your weekend? Do you want to color? Do you want to, I don't know, knit?
Do you want a garden?
Do you like to kill people? So I guess whatever answers I gave, I didn't pass.
Did
I didn't pass the psychological test for the FBI.
What did the recruiting agent tell you?
The agent called me back, and he was like, I don't know how to tell you this. And I had already joined the DOJ. So I was I'm sorry, I take that back. I was already in my federal clerkship. I clerked for a federal judge. So I was already in my clerkship. I already had a job. So there really wasn't any kind of but anyway, he called me up and he was like, I don't know how to tell you this. And I was like, what? And he was like, well, in my 20-year career, I've never seen someone not pass the psychological exam.
And we've opened a case on you now.
So anyway, I failed my psychological exam for the Bureau, and probably the world is better for it, right? Did you ever apply to the Bureau, to the FBI? I mean,
did.
I know you were.
I
know you were in 1811.
By one point, I think, they didn't get me for the serial killer category.
They got you in general knowledge. Yeah, the general stuff.
I mean, look at me, seriously.
I mean, it's not that simple. The first test is really not that. I mean,
she's trying to make me feel better.
No, it's not that. It's not that simple.
It's not brain surgery.
It's not that simple. But
Well, obviously,
obviously,
for me.
I'm sure at least for the recruiter, everybody passes the second
Well, it makes me,
test.
if they go, oh, look at this. It might explain like the SUVs in front of our house, and they're talking.
Anyway, I thought I did really well on both tests. I mean, I do like coloring on the weekend. So, I mean, if the Bureau doesn't want me.
You got the last laugh. You married me. Wait a minute.
Right.
That may have come out wrong. So.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know how we ventured down into the Bureau. There are when you're in law enforcement, it's not, you move around. Well, you can move around, like Secret Service to U.S. Marshals.
Well, I wanted to share that you sort of got bitten by the bug. Like, maybe this would be something interesting to do. And obviously not.
Well, after the clerkship, I did definitely have an idea. I thought I was going into a big firm.
Okay.
So I actually thought that was where I was going to go into. But then I did actually, while I was in the clerkship, have a lot of dealings with federal agencies. Like in the district court, you have the FBI and all these. And I actually was fascinated by that law. So I thought, well, we'll see if I go into the honors program and see if I get picked up, and I did. So, but I did get kind of bitten by the law enforcement bug.
Yeah.
And then when I was stationed with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, when I was picked up by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they had us go into the institution to defend the warden and officers that were there. But I was trained as a law enforcement officer, because when you're inside the institution, you respond as if you're
Why don't you
an
tell
officer.
The audience where we met?
we met in Fletsy.
We met at Glencoe, Georgia, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center.
That's where exactly right. So we were both being trained. You were being trained as an 1811 for.
Right. I was in the investigator school, and my lovely wife was down.
What agency were you doing that for?
It's Penelope.
Okay. Well, we can drop that. But yeah.
But my lovely wife was down there because all Bureau employees have to go through training.
Federal Bureau employees.
And she had been there about maybe a half hour, and looking just breathtakingly beautiful.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that's.
You can keep that.
We don't need. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So there. Yeah.
So I met you down there.
We did.
So we had the interest there.
You know, I have a question. And I can maybe tell some stories on this as well. But like, when you're in law enforcement, how does it change the way you look at the world? How does it change the way you interact with the world?
I'm not going to use where you're more paranoid, but you're just more cautious, and you sort of your antenna are up a lot more than normally you travel through life. If we're at the beach with our toes in the sand, we can relax, where as opposed to when we leave here, we have to walk to our car. You're more conscious of your surroundings. So does that answer your question?
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to tell a few stories on you for the way you look at the world. So by
all means.
The first time that we were going out and we were dating, it was clear that there was, like, when we would interact with each other, you were always on high alert. That's the best way to describe it.
See, now you make me sound like a real.
But no, I feel like that's probably something in law enforcement, that you are kind of looking for where the dangers are.
Okay.
Right? So like when we first started dating, when we would go into a restaurant, do you remember you would always sit so that you could see the door? Right? So no matter where we were.
That's in case my wife came in and saw me with dating you. So
but I mean, wherever we were, we would always have to like switch seats or move seats so that you could see the door.
Right. That's okay. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could switch to see the door.
Go ahead.
Or if I was in the district and you didn't know where I was in the district.
Okay. Gather around, boys and girls. Let me share this with you.
But I'll tell you something before you tell this story.
No.
Wait, before you tell the story, though, I have to say that partially being married to a law enforcement person, you need to just accept that this is the way they see the world.
Possibly. So gather around, boys and girls,
and not get angry.
Get closer to the speaker, because this is a good story. So I love my wife, and
do you?
I do. And if she asks you, tell her I said that. On her off days, she would take our children Let me try this. She would take our children to the museums and the different areas of D.C. that it's famous for.
Yes.
And occasionally she would fill up the car with her friends, and they would go down as a big herd of people. So I'm working one day.
Wait, before I was able to go into the district, I would have to, or really anywhere, not just the district, I would have to like kind of explain to you what I was doing what I was doing with the children.
You have a bad sense of direction. That's all.
And so there was kind of this heightened awareness of like, where are you at any moment of the day? Prior to cell phones and way of tracking me now.
I'm a freak here. Like, oh, okay. No, you're not a raccoon with a collar that I'm tracking you in the woods. Okay. So I'm at work one day.
Yeah.
And at work, we listen to the radio broadcast of what's going on in the street. And I hear one of the units go out with a parked car down at the National Mall.
This is a different story than
I
was thinking of.
Oh, good. That's all right. It's my story.
Okay. This is a better story, actually.
Down by the National Gallery of Art.
Yeah.
So down there, they're checking the tag, and at some point, the officer says, "Can you provide me the owner's information on this car?" And at that we were like, "Oh my gosh, that's really strange. You don't really have that reaction. If you're writing a ticket, you just put down the license plate, the make and model, location." So the dispatchers kind of paused and said, "Yes, I can." And there was another long pause. And the officer said, "Please give me the information of the owner of this car." And another long pause. And then the dispatcher said, "It's force personnel." And at that time.
So it means like somebody on the force.
Yeah,
it's their job. It's
personnel.
Force personnel. It's their car.
So at that moment, everyone within the radio listening area is like, "Oh my gosh, what has this person done? And whose car is it?" So everyone's leaning into the radio.
But it's not clear what's happening because it could be that it's like at a murder scene. It could be it could be some
instead
horrific,
of say an illegally parked car.
It's just a parked car.
Just a parked car.
It's not clear when it's happening,
Not clear what's happening. So the dispatcher has to now put over the airwaves my information for my car is parked somewhere where, as far as I know, it's not supposed to be.
Accidentally.
So
it's accidentally not where it's supposed
to be. And then the officer, "Okay, thank you." So, of course, me being... what's that officer's phone number? So I hey, what's going on? Your car's down here, and there's a little discrepancy with it. So I call my wife. And I go, "Hey, where are you at?"
Okay.
"Well, we're here with the kids.
We're
walking
with the
around."
kids.
And so where are you at?
District.
"Well, we're walking around. Right. Where are you at, Renee? Where are you at?" So, we're down here.
It was parked.
Are you
improperly?
Parked
accidentally?
Illegally? "I don't think I am. I think I'm okay. So go back to the car, please."
Let me just say, if you're not married to law enforcement, that's not going to happen to you. You're not going to have someone track you down while you're in the district and have like a uniformed police officer like waiting there when you have your two babies just toddling out to the car.
What story did you want to share?
I thought you were going to share when I came.
You got pulled over?
No, when I came in and I was going to get the lamp repaired. And
don't do
bad.
that, because that literally,
that was a bad one.
Yeah, Child Protective Services will call that. That's right.
That's not true. That's not true.
It was the inauguration of President George W. Bush, and we were working very long days. The actual inauguration was taking place very shortly, and I'm at DuPont Circle because somebody had hung an effigy in the trees, and we're trying to get it down, and it was a horrible thing. So my phone goes off, and it's my lovely wife crying hysterically.
Wait, I wasn't crying on that call. I do cry a lot, but that one I don't think I was crying on.
Okay.
I don't think so. And I don't remember it being, I don't remember it being an inauguration.
It's exactly what it was.
Was it?
It was the inauguration. And an officer had pulled my wife over. So she's very upset. My son's in the back, and she made it very clear that the officer was somewhat aggressive. No.
I mean, he was just scared. It was just frightening.
It was frightening.
It was frightening.
So the point
Which
being
anyone being pulled over, they can understand that.
Yes, any circumstances. But the interesting thing is that, and we're letting this out for the whole world to know, I've been on the force for 20 years before that, and I really recognizable name, but this officer worked at a station where my brother was a street sergeant and has the same last name.
Yeah.
So when he wrote the ticket,
he
wrote out not only my name, but a sergeant in his own station's last name.
Yeah. So he definitely, I definitely caused great embarrassment. Let's put it that way.
I'm not sure to us or to the officer. I don't know.
To my sweet husband and his family, because Kevin also has his brother also works on the force as well. So
he did.
Yeah. I accidentally broke the law several times. And unfortunately, when you don't have law enforcement in your family, it doesn't normally go down this way.
I don't think people need to hear that.
When you do have law enforcement, that's what I mean. Like, you just can't get mad. You can't get mad because what happens is there's like an overreaction. There's an overreaction for doing things that like normal people get pulled over, park in the wrong place or whatever. But anyway, as far as a family life is concerned, then not only is it implicating you, but then like your brother and other people that are, that know you and just realize that you've married a criminal.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is for these things. So we might be getting a summons in the mail.
Exactly.
But we go back to being away from your family in situations when you should be there with them. So obviously the inauguration of president, it's all hands on deck, and you're out driving around.
Or the 4th of July holidays, things that you would normally have where you're all together. But you definitely have to sacrifice.
If I had been there at the time, I'm sure I wouldn't have been speeding. Number one.
Mercy.
And if I had been pulled over.
This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Of what?
I wouldn't be speeding, and I wouldn't have parked in the wrong place.
Which is so odd, because you traditionally just go under the speed limit all the time. The cars line up behind you, honking the horn. Hey.
Well, after that, I do. After that, I get a little bit more touchy about where I park my car if it's going to be over the radio and like a uniformed police officer is going to be there with his lights on with my little toddlers.
All the more reason for you never to leave the house ever again. So
I do become much more careful about that. Okay, so you want to go to where the end of your
my career?
Yeah, well, just how you left the agent, how you exited. What are you doing now?
I on my first available day to retire, I did.
Yeah. And why was that? Why did you go out when you did?
Because my children were at this formative age where they needed someone there all the time. I make it sound like our children are hoodlums here or something.
Well, they could have turned out to be hoodlums. So
given the opportunity.
Or parking in the wrong spot.
Or speeding. So when the opportunity came for the first available day for me to retire and being vested in my pension, I put my paperwork in, and much to the sort of shock of other people, like, why? So because I have a 10-year-old and I have how old is he? A 7-year-old at home?
Yeah, 10 and 7.
So I could be there and sort of make up for the 10 years and the 7 years that I missed out on things.
Yeah.
So retired. I teach 22. Now. What's that?
Well, retired with 22 years. So
24
it was
years.
24 years. I keep saying 22. 24 years. So it wasn't, you had lots and lots of years on, even though you did retire very young. You retired at 50, right?
I retired at 50.
Right at 50.
And then I still keep busy. I teach at George Mason University. Yeah. I'm an adjunct there. I do some training for law enforcement agencies. And I just the opportunity to retire and be with family was greater than staying for an additional 5 or 10 years for a small percentage added to a pension. It just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So,
and also the service had been completed kind of in our minds, the service to what you wanted to do there and what you had achieved there.
And to be completely fair to you, you'd sacrificed a great deal in your career going part-time. And this was an opportunity for you to go and move on with your career and go back to work and be promoted and flourish in what you're doing today.
The other thing too was prior to you leaving the force, glowing on you a little bit, you went back and got your master's degree.
I did.
At Boston University. And so you were kind of looking forward to that date of when you could retire so that you would set yourself up to teach at the college level and also to take on consulting.
Well, the teaching
positions.
Just sort of happened. I don't know. I was contacted by a recruiter at the university, and I didn't plan on it, but it's been 10 years of a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and it's been a
great
opportunity. Maybe great. More so getting the graduate degree was to put it towards helping law enforcement professionals more than college students, but it completely flipped the other way. I'm with college students every semester, which is very rewarding, and they can be very wonderful. They can be very trying also, and I teach more at the university level than I do with my consulting and helping out there.
Yeah, I think sometimes too, because this affects us in the Bureau as well, that so much of when we talk about law enforcement, we don't talk about young retirement, because most of us will retire at maximum in our late 50s, and some of us will go out at 50. And I think when you're first joining as a law enforcement officer, people do not talk about the fact that you will have a second career. There will be something you do with your life.
Well, what have you found out with your what's coming to fruition now with your fellow attorneys? They have a law enforcement, and they have to leave at a certain age, and they can't support their families.
And the same as law enforcement, it's a mandatory out. Like, I think people don't understand that. When people think, oh, mandatory retirement, I'm gonna win the lottery at 50, and I'm gonna sit in the beach. Not that that's absolutely impossible to do. You can radically change the way you live right now and move to some place that you can really just live off of your pension. And we know that your brother doesn't have completely a whole nother career. He didn't establish a whole nother career. So it's not that you have to do that. But I mean, even with the lawyers that work for me, they are mandatory out, which means most of them will be getting another job. They will be recruiting and getting another job.
They're supporting their children as they go away to college.
Exactly right. Like when you are in your 50s, it's not the time to start living. I mean, again, like most of us will have kids, and most of them will go on to maybe college or even further than that, to like graduate work. And so you will need to have income, or you will want, that's a better way to say it, want to have, you will want to supplement your income probably. So like even you didn't take on completely a separate job, another full-time job, like you didn't step into another job, but working for the university was definitely our way of transitioning you from retirement, or from retiring with that 24 years into another, way of taking a living.
Again, supplementing or augmenting the income.
Yeah, exactly right. So thinking about that going forward, it definitely changed our life. It radically changed our life because we had up until that point for what was that, like maybe 10 or 12 years of our marriage, worked 6 days a week, 10-hour days.
And suddenly I'm at home all the time.
Yeah, day in, weekend,
what do you do with that?
Month in, year in, and year out.
No, don't make it sound so.
It's a long, long haul. But anyway, but then when you retire, you definitely have a different transition to make, because then you're together a lot.
Well, and even the retirement preparation that is made or available to people who are approaching that, make sure you have a hobby, or you make sure you do something. I had 2 children at home, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. What hobby can I possibly have? My responsibility is watching those children. So, but now that we're in our our later years, and they're mature and they moved on.
Yeah, our kids have just left the house.
It's just so funny because now you're working full time, and I am semi-teaching full time and doing other things.
Right.
So we make what time is available to be together, but it almost feels as though we have less time together now than we did, when.
But I would think that if someone told me, I think a really good idea to think about is that there are different phases in your life, and just because one particular phase might feel difficult, it's not going to be like that forever. So there are good things and bad things about having little teeny babies, working 6 days a week, 10-hour days. But then there's good things and bad things here, but just to realize that life has these different phases, and that particular phase is not, even if it's kind of hard in the moment, that, there's another phase that might be a little bit easier. And I feel like this one is really great.
Yeah, we're doing good right now.
Yeah.
We're doing good.
But I have really liked all of ours.
I don't want to give anyone the impression that we're not attentive to each other, but we are. It's just we have a lot of things we're juggling now, and
but a lot more free time, like a lot more free time.
Yes, we do.
To do things that we
can do things
than we want to do.
Best advice I'd ever gotten was from an instructor down at Glencoe, and then my friend and mentor Ernie. The instructor said, as he was teaching young recruits, and very wide-eyed and idealistic early 20-year-olds thinking about they were going to save the world from horrible people and criminals. And he was this old grizzled U.S. Marshal, and he was teaching us some physical fitness techniques. And at some point, we're sort of catching our breath. And he said, just remember one thing. This job is a lot, but when you're old and in a wheelchair, who's going to wipe the oatmeal off your chin? I kind of looking at each other. And there's about a 10 count. He said, family.
Yeah.
He said, okay, there we go. Family. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. And Ernie, again, my friend and mentor, basically said the same thing. He said, when it comes down to it, it's just a job, maybe more so than other jobs, more stress and more responsibility. But at the end of the day, you want to go home safe, and you want to be with those people that you love, because that's what that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
So find someone who's going to wipe the oatmeal off your chin.
That's great advice. I was going to say, what advice would you give to your younger self? But I think that's
perfect right there.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Remember,
pass on something that I learned 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And anyone listening, especially if they're looking for a career in law enforcement or they're involved in it now, and they think about their responsibilities and they have to make more money or they have to do these things, just remember, at the end of the day, when the sun is setting, who's going to be there for you to take care of you? And that's what we have to really focus on right now. And it's family. And that's why we're lucky to have the life that we've led, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk about our life.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's all the time we have. So thanks for sharing your experience.
Thanks for talking to me in a nice way.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Icons, featuring Kevin Fornshill and guest host Renee Fornshill. We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the community. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. The Icon series is not just about contemporary figures in the law enforcement community, but about all of those who have served their communities and the world, from now and in the past. Be sure to tune back in with us for future Icons episodes exclusively on Tuesdays every month to learn about key figures in American law enforcement history. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.